IPMNation.com.
Living in a city, when you're in it, watch the people walk by. And if you listen real close, you can hear them talk about their lives. And some hate it, some love it, some are thought, some are just tired. These are the people in the neighborhood, they just trying to make it out right.
Hey, good evening, everybody. This is Dr. John Rich, and you tuned into Dr. John's Neighborhood. Thanks again for being a regular listener. I'm told by my producer that the audience for the show is growing, and I'm always happy to hear that I'm broadening my reach in an effort to try to expose people to other people who are trying to make the world a better place. I would encourage you to reach out if you're interested in being a guest on the show or you have some ideas for the show. You can reach me through my website. My email address is info@drjohnrich.com. That's connected to my site at drjohnrich.com. So I have on the line with me today Noelle Ward. Say hello, Noelle.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah. And Noelle, you're a very interesting person. I got in contact with you through Facebook because you run a group where you allow people who basically are trying to make the world a better place and doing businesses that are helping others to promote what they're doing. So even though we have other things to talk about, can you talk about that? Like, how long have you been doing that Facebook group, and where did you get the idea to offer that incredible service?
Yeah, so the Facebook group is called Entrepreneurs Serving Teens. And basically, I'm mostly on Instagram. And on Instagram, I had made several contacts and reached out to other people who are serving teens in a different way than I am. Because oftentimes I come across parents and teens and realize, okay, well, there's a need here, but this isn't the need that I feel. You know, my superpowers are in this direction, but what you need is something different. But so I don't have what you need, but I know who does.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how it started to become a thing. And actually, one of the other people that I had met online had reached out to me. We were connecting and met each other virtually. And she said, I've always wanted to start a Facebook group for people like us, so we can connect and kind of have an inter-referral type of opportunity so we can serve our folks better. But I just don't have time to get it up and running on my own. I said, well, I've had the same interest, but can't quite do it all on my own. So we decided to team up together and put this out in the world and let it kind of grow from there.
Yeah. And so for those people who are interested in starting a Facebook group to connect other people, because it's a great feature of social media, what's the secret to building a following? Can you share some of the tips?
Sure. Well, as far as growing our Facebook group, I think the most of that is from our own personal contacts, or anytime someone reaches out to me and says, I kind of do what you do, or I want to see what you do, or I want to pick your brain. I always talk to them and also direct them to the group, because I said, I'm part of that equation, but I can connect you with a whole network of people that can even broaden this discussion further. And so that's how we do that on the Facebook side. Now, on the Instagram side, I've built a very large following on Instagram, but I had never been on Instagram before October of last year. So it was completely new to me. I was always one who was on Facebook, and so I just didn't understand it. But that has been a lot of fun. It's a very engaging platform. And so I just started posting on a regular basis, kind of seeing what was on my mind and trying to post and make things that were relevant that I thought that the teens and parents really were interested in hearing and that I didn't really see out there. And so that's really how it all came to be. And I started making my own images and my own captions and stories. And it's been so much fun. I really enjoy that platform.
Yeah, I've been scared of Instagram just because it's new. I don't even have an account.
Well, I can appreciate that. That was me of October last year. And the first month I was on there, I was like, I don't get it. Like, where's a DM? And what does this mean? And what does this link in bio mean? Like, I was completely oblivious.
Yeah.
It definitely took some intention to get used to it. But now, now I don't even go to Facebook anymore except for a couple of the groups that I interact with.
Huh. Interesting.
So,
yeah. So something about you that's kind of interesting, and you can talk about, how do you bridge the gap, is that you've got this online presence and then you're also in the corporate world. So can you explain those two lives that you're living there?
Yes. So my background, I'm an occupational therapist, and occupational therapists teach people of all different ages and abilities different life skills for success.
Okay.
And that can mean a lot of things. In my past, for example, I used to work with teens with spinal cord injuries who were paralyzed either from the neck down, arms down, legs down. And I would have to teach them how to do the basics, like how to eat again or how to get dressed when your legs are paralyzed and things like that. But there was definitely a psychosocial component to all of my work, especially in that realm, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
So that's what I do as an OT, but now I'm the director of rehabilitation for a large home health agency. So that's my corporate world. And my corporate world, and even the job before I have my current role, I was a director at another facility where I was responsible for about 150 employees and volunteers and students. And it was there that I realized that our students coming out of college had great clinical skills or had good academic skills, but they didn't really have, they didn't know how to communicate with one another. They didn't know how to have customer service skills or how to deal with conflict with a coworker. They didn't know how to do basic things at home. They were always saying they were out of money, but then when I talked through, are you putting anything on your 401k? When you go to the grocery store, do you know how to save money at the grocery store? They didn't know how to do any of those things.
Yeah.
And so I found myself starting mentoring a lot of students and new graduates, and then I was doing lunch and learns on these types of topics. And that's kind of where this all started. I thought, wow, we really aren't preparing our students well enough for life, taking care of themselves and to be self-sufficient.
Yeah.
And I have 2 young kids, and I thought, okay, we need to be starting this earlier. And so from that, I started doing local workshops for grades, starting in 2nd grade up through high school. And through the local workshops, that was really fun. Did that locally, and now I sell that curriculum online nationally, or I'm in the process of doing that. But I also really wanted to reach the teens, and the teens are really busy, but they always have time for their phones. And so every night they're on their phones up late at night. I thought, well, I can do an online e-course or have a community online where they can get this information on their own terms. And that's how Life Skills for College was born.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. I'll do a shameless plug that's connected to what you were saying. If you go to my Facebook group, which is drjohnrich.com, no, that's my page. I have a group that's called Money Matters, where there's a community talking about saving money, investing money, different kinds of things to try to stretch the dollar. So that's an important thing for me. And in my role as a university professor, I definitely can see that my students have not been taught how to create a budget, how to follow a budget, why a budget is important, or any of the strategies that you and I have probably developed over the years to try to make wise choices.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's kind of what it all comes down to. And the same thing, I have an e-course for, money management for specifically for college freshmen, just because they don't know things like, when you go to an ATM that's not at your own bank, you're going to get charged extra for that.
Huh.
And some of those basic things that we as parents take for granted, and they're finding out the hard way that that's not how it works. Or they're just finding out, I talked to a lot of seniors and particularly a lot of students in master's level programs that say, gosh, why didn't anybody tell me this when I was a freshman in college? And so that's where a lot of the content comes from as well, is from their feedback and what they wish they had known.
Yeah. Well, I don't know much about occupational therapy, but I know that in academia, I like to joke that the reason that students don't know as much about real life as they do about academics is because they're being taught by academics. And if you've ever encountered 2 academics, I guarantee one of them was completely socially inept. So,
well, and these are the things that we test for. In school now, especially in public schools, where we have to test or teach to the test, because that's what our funding comes from. So if I'm an administrator in a school system, that's what's the priority, and I understand that. That's how our incentives are set up in this country. So they may want to teach character traits, and many of them are doing a lot more of that now, and that's refreshing to see. But they can't devote as much time to it because that's not measured on a test.
Right.
But they know arithmetic is.
Yeah, in the field of psychology, there are certain things that you need to know in order to be able to pass the certification test or the licensure test. And none of them are about creating a budget or how to communicate well with your partner or anything like that.
That's right. Yeah, and especially in that role, you really have to know how to read body language, and you have to know how to, establish rapport and have those kinds of conversations, which all of us need to know how to do, whether we're in a counseling role or not, just working with a coworker. If I can read their body language and if it's incongruent with what they have to say, then I can say, okay, wait a minute, there's something going on here I'm not getting the whole story. Or they're saying they're fine, they're not mad at me, but they clearly are, and I need a way to be able to address that and get down to the root issue here.
Yeah.
So, but we don't teach those things in school.
I mean, the lucky thing for students in my department is that psychology is fairly applied discipline. So you do get to learn a lot about yourself. But the person who is studying chemistry gets out into the real world and encounters some kind of social situation, and they're like, look at these, look at my beakers. That's all.
Yes. Well, and I think I definitely have a longing for the psychology side of things, because we get a lot of that in the occupational therapy world, because so much of what we do is about the person and who they are and what drives them, and finding it's not just the physical components. Now, we're not psychologists, but we have a lot of back training in that because it makes us much more effective at what we're trying to accomplish with them when you do have that understanding. And I do find that psychology students do have a better handle on a lot of that, like as you said, compared to those in other fields.
Yeah, right. Well, we force our students to kind of face their own issues, and not a lot of people do that by the time that they're 21.
That's right.
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you for some more specifics. When you talk about how, one of the big things that the services that you provide is about providing people in college with real life skills. So we've talked about money, but what are some other skills that you have discovered people between the ages of 18 to 22, let's say, are lacking?
Communication skills. That's the big one.
Okay.
And it's not that they can't have a conversation. I mean, many of them are very social and comfortable talking to people. There are people that are not, but that's not any different than it has been through the ages. What is different a little bit these days is, you don't have to have the face-to-face interaction like we used to have. So if you want to break up with someone, you can do it via text and not have to see their reaction and not have to do it in a respectful way where it's a little more uncomfortable, but it's more respectful. I find that folks don't know how to do that now. If there's a conflict at work, it's the same thing. They don't know how to address that conflict and be able to move past it. If there's a conflict with their roommate, the same thing. They realize, okay, well, I have to live with this person, but they don't know how to say what you're doing is really bothering me without. They're scared. They're usually just passive and say, well, I'll just deal with it. Or they're just scared that if they do say something, it's going to damage the relationship. And we've got to teach them how to have those conversations without damaging the relationship and being able to move the relationship forward.
And I imagine that can go in a number of different directions, all of which are detrimental. You can become angry and go on the attack, or you can shrink from it and decide not to talk at all.
Right.
So
yeah. When they know what to do, if it's been modeled for them and they've had time to practice, or oftentimes they just haven't seen that path before.
Yeah.
So if you can show them, okay, let's say your roommate is, being loud and on the phone, talking on the phone late night when you're trying to go to sleep. Well, we had to make sure we had some boundaries established prior to that. But if we didn't establish any early boundaries, then that's a whole other situation. So now we have to say, look, I really want to talk to you about something that's been on my mind, and I want to just kind of share with you what I'm thinking about it and kind of get your perspective on it and see how we can move forward.
Yeah.
And having some simple, non-threatening, but direct ways to have those conversations. It's amazing. The teens I work with, they're like, oh, I can do that. Now, okay, I can do that. This will make sense. Okay, I can try that. Okay, that feels uncomfortable, but doable.
Right.
They just need to have some tools in their toolbox to be able to pull from, and that's what they're lacking.
So it seems to me that for these techniques to work, there has to be an assumption that most people are interested in having conversations that are devoid of conflict and that they want things to work out. So do you have that optimistic belief about people?
I do. I do. I don't think they really want to be in conflict. I think sometimes avoiding the conflict or addressing it aggressively is sometimes the path of least resistance. It's harder to be able to have those conversations, and I just don't think they're equipped to do it. I think they're willing if they just knew what to do. Now, that being said, no one likes conflict, but we all know it's a part of life, and it doesn't have to feel like conflict. It's just a conversation. But I think shifting the framework of how we view it from conflict to conversation is really where the magic happens with the teens.
Yeah, I remember being in school and hearing somebody talk about communication and saying that the key to successful communication, or at least one of them, is you go into any conversation giving the other person the benefit of the doubt, that they're not trying to sabotage you or be against you or to mess you up or to get in your way. If they say something and you don't agree with it, there's not an intent to turn it into a fight. It is just a disagreement that can be worked through as long as you agree to believe that they're not trying to be an asshole.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
and we talk about that a lot. You always go into the, using one of Stephen Covey's, 7 habits, you assume the best in others first. And always assume that, like you said, you assume there's a win-win situation that's going to happen out of this. Don't assume it's going to be, well, I'm going to get my way, or they're going to get their way. Just assume you're going to come to a win-win, in the end, and assume that they want that as well. And honestly, I think that's what we all want. I mean, I don't want to be judged or someone avoid me for conflict because they think that I'm doing something malicious to them, and I'm not. And I don't even know that they think that.
Right.
So I want to have the opportunity to at least have that discussion versus them just being upset with me and I didn't even know it.
Yeah. Right. So, to some degree, the people who are having trouble with communication, I imagine, haven't been taught strategies for doing it right. But you have to have also run into people who have faulty communication skills because that was what was modeled for them by their own parents.
Absolutely. And I see that a lot. I live in Alabama. I'm in the deep South, and us Southern belles, we are taught to be polite and passive. And so I find, especially the ladies, tend to act more passive, and that is what has been modeled for them from the generations ahead of us. Was you just bite your tongue, and it's not worth the conflict. So that's not been modeled. So they have to learn those types of things, and someone has to show us how to do that.
Yeah.
But like you said, sometimes they didn't either learn it from home, or again, even if they did learn it from home, because we are so much more tech savvy and on our phones more, which I'm not opposed to, it just means we don't have as much face-to-face interaction as we used to. And so those skills don't develop as early. And so I think there's a little bit of a social immaturity that's occurring because of that. There's just a bit of a lag because there's not as much experience in that front. Yeah,
well, there's another layer to conversation when you're in front of a person than when you're just typing or texting. Speaking of you being from the South and people being polite, I remember I had a friend who was from the South, and she used to say that Southern people, yes, they're polite, but they have a polite tone while they're criticizing you. So she said,
"Oh yes, we're really good at that.
There can
you
be
can very
like
gracefully put somebody in their place."
Right. So you could even say like, "Well, how are you doing? You're willing to just wear anything, aren't you?" That kind of thing. Or,
yeah, it can also be very passive aggressive.
Yeah. Okay, so we've done 2. Let's go with the magic 3, and then I want to talk to you about your childhood. We've got money and communication. So what would you say would be a third area where what you're providing for people really helps kind of fill a gap or a need that you see?
Well, when I did this series recently where I videotaped about 60 students who were they'd already gotten their bachelor degree, and I said, what would you go back and tell yourself as a freshman coming in? What would you want to know?
Yeah.
And
I've done that too. That's a fascinating conversation.
It is. And what I found is the majority, there were all kinds of themes, but the loudest theme and most often recurring theme related to time management.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, and even time management and goal setting, because really the time management, learning how to break down a big task into small chunks, and so kind of the idea of having like one large goal, like I'm going to finish this English paper, but I need to break it down into chunks and map out my time. They just really don't know how to do that, and then they get to college, and then you really need to have that skill to thrive right out of the gates.
Yes.
Now, they usually pick it up eventually, but sometimes that's not till their junior, senior year. And by then, the academics have already hit a hard place. So knowing that when they go into college and having practiced that in high school, I think is critical.
Yeah. Yeah. I've told people, if you're going to go to graduate school can be easier than undergrad because there's less work, but it can also be more difficult because you may have a class at the beginning of class that says 100% of your grade is a 50-page paper that's due on December 10th. And if you say, wow, I've got a vacation until December 9th, and then you write up some piece of trash, you're going to be in big trouble.
Yes.
So breaking down a 50-page paper into 10 5-page papers that you then spend the next several weeks creating transitions between the parts and things like that.
I think it's a brilliant skill and task to help teach our youth. And I find that, when I'm talking to parents and teens in high school, we're also overscheduled, that it's hard to give them the opportunity to do that sometimes. And I think that's a whole nother issue that we're also, and as a parent, I'm struggling with that with my kids, is, how do I allow them to do extracurriculars without it taking over their life and still giving me the time to work on things they like, teaching them how to cook and teaching them how to balance a checkbook and all those types of things. It's hard to find time to do that, especially with working parents and overscheduled children, which I'm guilty of.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you do it? So you've got a corporate job.
I struggle. Yeah, I've got a corporate job and I have an online business and 2 small kids. Fortunately, I have a very, very helpful husband who does a lot of the heavy lifting. And the same time, for example, both of my children are in soccer right now, and I would love it. I mean, they're only 8 and 10. But they're doing soccer 5 days a week, and we're not even in the travel competitive leagues.
Wow.
And I just want them to do like a couple of days a week, but it's either all or none. You're either in it 4 days a week or you're not in it at all. And so, we're really struggling in our home is, okay, we have to sit down and have the family meeting and balance out. Like, when are we going to set, let's figure out what our priorities are and make sure we've scheduled out some time to hit those priorities and let everything else kind of fill in the gaps. But at the end of the week, what was important for us to accomplish this week as a family?
Yeah. Nice. All right. So this is related, but a little bit of a transition here. I'm a big believer in the idea that when a person has a passion, they have a passion for it because it used to be a weakness of theirs and some kind of light bulb went off for them at a certain point, or there was an evolution of themselves that they would like to share with other people. So let's just go back in time and talk about you before you realized all this stuff that you're teaching other people. Like, where did the shift go from you not knowing any of these skills to working on them in your own life?
I think the big pivotal time for me was high school. I would say prior to high school, I was just kind of, I wasn't a fantastic student. I was average, and I didn't put a whole lot of effort into academics, but I did okay. And I was just kind of floating through, my life. I wasn't very driven towards anything. And right towards 8th grade, 9th grade, that started to shift. And then I really started taking on some more leadership roles, especially as I became a competitive dancer, which I danced my whole life, but it wasn't to a competitive level or anything like that until 8th grade. And that was a big shift. And then I started teaching at the dance studio, and then I was captain of the dance team and things like that.
Wow.
But one of the things during that period that was interesting to me is I often felt like I had many people in my life from a teacher or mentor or coach perspective that were very not necessarily great leaders. And so I was learning from them what not to do. Okay. And that was very powerful to see, wow, this is what I know. I don't really know necessarily the path forward, but I know this is not the path I want to take, or this is not how I think this should be handled.
So tell me what you mean. Give me some specifics
about
I
can give
things
you
that
a lot of specifics, but
made them bad leaders.
Yeah, I think that there was a lot of times I had 2 dance teachers in particular, one at the school and one in my personal, where I did my private dance practice, who were kind of arch enemies. And so they would pit us again, do things towards us to kind of penalize the other person.
Right.
And that was really unfortunate. Now, thankfully, we could see through it, but at the same time, they often had more authority and power over our schedules and And that was really just unfortunate. One day, one at school said, okay, we're having a mandatory practice at, Thursday at 4:00, knowing that's when I also had my competitive practice, and my studio competed against hers.
So you had to
she
pick.
Was kind of, she was trying to self-sabotage that, and I knew what she was doing. And, but I had to be the one to say, look, this has been scheduled since the beginning of the year. This is something you just popped up on, so I'm glad to do another rehearsal, but you can't just pop it up like this in the last minute. I have other commitments. So, being able to have those conversations, and, of course, she held it against the group of us that she was trying to get at that practice that day. But, I had to just realize that was her problem, not mine.
Yeah. Well, she's making you take on the role of the adult there.
Well, and both of them did that quite a bit. I did feel like I was more the adult, but it helped me grow in many ways. But there were many times I thought, wow, why am I the adult here? I don't understand what's happening.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that was pivotal. And unfortunately, I had parents who weren't actually, I didn't share as much of that at the time with them because, I was trying to show my independence and, branch out on my own in those ways. But they had taught me through the years, especially like my dad does a lot of leadership training and growth. He was really into self-help books and, books on tape and all of that. So I had a good foundation from listening to him and his teachings through the years that I really was able to apply to those situations when I was in high school.
Yeah. Does he know that?
He does. Oh, yes. I tell him all the time.
Yeah. That's good because, sometimes we don't realize that our parents don't know how we think of them. And unless we tell them, well, remember when you said that? That really impacted me. Or
yeah, I'd say both my parents had a huge impact on me for different reasons, and both positive. So I was very blessed in that way. I was very blessed.
So speaking of leadership, if you were to just look back on your life, is there a person that you can tell us about who you would say was a great example of what a leader should be?
Oh gosh, I've had several examples. I would say the first one that comes to my mind is usually my dad. Okay. He ran a company, and I got to go and work for him in the summers at the front desk, just answering phones. But I watched him. He was really well regarded where he worked, and it was because he knew how to connect with the employees. He was a really good listener, and he would round to always go and know what's going on with the employees, not only from a business standpoint, but he knew everybody's, kids' names and their lives and what was important to them. And he always said, look, your family is important first. But then, when it also came to business, I would listen to him and how he handled difficult situations with either staff or with an upset customer or things like that. And so I really learned he was always calm under pressure, and he didn't get rattled, and he would listen first and then again try to reach that win-win. If it couldn't be a win-win, he was still really respectful in how he had those conversations. And so I just did a lot of watching him at work, and then at the dinner table I would ask him questions and just listen to how he handled different situations.
So there's that communication piece again that you were talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Was he good with money? We talked about money. Was he good with money?
He was, and he was very open with money, which was really nice. He taught me how to balance my checkbook. He, both of my parents gave me money. I had to earn everything that I paid for related to dance, as far as my dance classes, my competition fees, my costume fees. I had to earn and pay for. I had to earn and pay for half of my first car, which was, old piece of junk, but I was so glad to have it because I had earned half of it. So there was a lot of putting that in. And also, from very, very early on, they start talking about retirement and investing. So my first job right out of the gate, I need to put 20% away right off the bat. And, now that I'm in my mid-40s, I'm really appreciating that.
Wow. Great.
Yeah.
So the third area, time management. Did he show you any lessons about that?
Yes, although I'd say my mom was really the time management master. She was very organized, and she and I both, I find that when we get stressed out, we like to organize. And in many ways, that means, organizing my day and mapping out my day and what it looks like and kind of getting a sense of control over that. Even if it's a chaotic day, at least I have a sense of, okay, here's the direction I'm headed in. So my dad also did a lot with goal setting. I think he taught me a lot from the goal setting standpoint. And then my mom told me a lot about organization. And not that she sat down and gave me verbal instruction, like this is how you do it. She just lived it. And I just watched her do it and picked up on a lot of things that way.
Yeah. I would imagine if you're like anybody else, when you went away to college, you met a lot of people who were not brought up in such a solid home as yourself.
That is correct. That is correct. A lot of people. And that's kind of what I see now. It's not that even with the teens I work with, many of them have fantastic families they come from and well-intentional families that are active and engaged. But we all kind of gravitate towards what our parents were best at. We tend to do better in those areas, and we don't do as well in the things that we haven't been modeled. So we have to look out to the world and learn those things elsewhere. And even from a communication standpoint, I still, my mom was from Wisconsin, so she's not your typical Southern belle. But even then, I was surrounded by a community in between, my teachers and my grandmother and everybody else. I was still very clear on the fact that passive was better. And it wasn't until I was in my late 20s and I was working in Atlanta with these amazing, brilliant, assertive women that I thought, oh, wow, there's a whole other way to communicate here that I've just not even really been aware of. And that was really not to my late 20s that I had those conversations. So, and that really learned those lessons.
So there's another light bulb moment for you, another pivotal
Absolutely.
piece.
Absolutely. I do wish I had learned a lot more of those skills. It would have saved me a lot of drama in high school and college had I learned that earlier in life.
So I hope you take this the right way. I don't think you'll misinterpret it, but did you encounter when you decided to start being more assertive? The fear is that people are going to call you a bitch, right? So did that turn into a problem? They do.
Well, in some ways, in our, again, kind of where I'm from, that is it is like even among my supper club group, the women are like, oh yeah, I'm viewed as more abrasive.
Okay.
Now when I go up north and, hang out with my brother in Boston, like I'm still really calm and subtle and docile.
No, you're not abrasive at all. Yeah.
No, not at all. But I just know that there's just a different sense here, and I know that their frame of reference is just different than mine now because I had the opportunity to be exposed to that elsewhere. And I know that that's okay. I'm comfortable with that. And honestly, I'm okay if that's what they think. I mean, I don't think that is the case, and I think they know my heart. But I think that it's hard to sometimes see past that. And I would say that was really hard for me when I I've been in management almost my entire career, but there were definitely times in my career where I had a lot of people working for me that were more your typical Southern belle. And, that's really hard. I needed those assertive communication skills to be a good manager, but that doesn't always mean that I was loved. So I always had to go above and beyond to try to connect and make sure that they really did see my heart and not just be, kind of taken back by my directness.
Yeah.
So I'd always have to start with sugar and sweet and then, kind of go in from there and communicate the way they wanted to be communicated with, not using my own style.
Well, so what's interesting about you compared to other guests that I've had on the show is that the good majority of the guests that I talk to have had terrible childhoods, quite honestly. They were not treated very well by their parents, or their parents had, substance abuse problems or whatever, that the motivation to help others for a lot of people comes from wanting to save other people from having to go through what they've gone through. But it sounds like in your case, you had a really strong foundation that your parents provided for you, and that allowed you to have the courage to go out and try to help other people overcome some of their obstacles.
Yes. I do always feel like, I was like, why was I so blessed to be born into this family? I am very lucky. I could have been born into any family. I could have been born into any country where women don't have the same rights as we do here. And so, on some level, I like to think that I've been given gifts or opportunities in order to help those that weren't born into that good fortune, because I do think that that's not something that everybody has. And so I don't know, I want to be able to provide for other people what I had from my family, because I do think that my family is a big part of what helped me be successful. And I wish that for every child. I wish that for every teen that I meet, that they had come from that background. But most people don't. Yeah. But okay, well, let's talk about what we can do and what skills we can learn to help you be successful moving forward. And I enjoy that.
Yeah. So if people were going to try to find you, where would they do that? Website or email, or how do they find you?
Well, the best place to reach me is on Instagram. But if you're like me, this time last year, I would have been like, really? Come on, I'm not on Instagram. Give me something else. Okay. So I'll give you my Instagram handle first, and then a URL so you can reach me at it. So I'm on Instagram at Life Skills for College, and that's the number 4, not the word 4. So Life Skills for College. You can also find me at Linktree/Life Skills for College, but that's spelled a little differently. It's not www. It's just linktr.ee/Life Skills, the number 4, College.
Okay. And so when we go there, what are we going to find?
So when you go there, there's a free gift for anybody that stops by. It is the top 27 tips, tricks, hacks, and life skills teens must master before they go to college.
Great.
And so that's a nice, helpful tip for anybody that wants to see it. But then I also have access to my e-course for teens on communication, an e-course for teens on money management, and I also have a teen entrepreneurship community for those who are either starting or growing a business as a teen.
Wow, that's great. How long did it take you to put all that stuff together?
Well, that all started officially, the online version started in October of last year. However, I had been doing my local workshops for a couple of years here. So it really started about 3 years ago when it was all birthed.
Great. Well, sounds great. I definitely encourage people to go and check that out, especially if you're either in college or have children or relatives in college who everybody could use some extra stuff. I just put on another shameless plug, an article on my own website this morning that's about study tactics. It's not exactly life skills, but like
that's a life skill. That's important.
Yeah, my top 7 pieces of learning from being an educational psychologist about how you can study material and be more effective when it's time to take those tests. So great. I'm glad that we have access to you and people can go and check that out. I want to end on the question that I told you I was going to ask. It's kind of become a little project of mine to see what people have to say here. So just tell us all, thinking back on your entire life, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I would say it is to take action. Like whatever your dream is, whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, you have to get started and take action, even if you don't know what the path is yet. You have to just take that first step, and then the next step will reveal itself.
Yeah, that's great. I've seen, definitely online, I've seen people who they decide that they're going to start a blog, and then they'll go online to these kind of support groups and express the fact that they're scared to put their first article up because they don't feel like it's perfect.
Yeah.
And the advice from more veteran people like yourself is usually, well, nobody puts up anything that's perfect. You got to just put it out there and, you get better by doing it.
That's right. Progress, not perfection.
Great. Well, that's a good piece of advice for anybody. And being in psychology, I definitely recognize that there are a lot of people out there who have ideas about what they want to do, but they don't exactly know how to go about doing it. And I think it's kind of like that 50-page paper that they've got the 50-page paper in their mind and it seems overwhelming. And if they would just sit down and write the first page and then do that maybe once a week for 50 weeks, they would end up with a 50-page paper.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And even like if you talk to someone, a lot of the teens these days are really admire the YouTube influencers. But when you talk to them, they say, well, we just had to start. And I've just done it so much over and over and over. That's how I got to this point.
Yeah.
But I didn't, that's not where I started. So you just had to get going.
Right. Everybody sees the end product. They don't see any of the process along the way. You look at like an NFL football player and you see somebody making a tremendous catch, but you don't see the fact that they've been doing that for 18, 19, 20 years, 6 days a week, sweating their butts off out in the hot sun.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for being on the show. I'm grateful to have you out there helping us.
Well, thank you for having me. This has really been a treat. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks a lot. And thank you, listener, for tuning into the show. Looking forward to talking with you again next week. I'm hoping by next week I'll be able to announce my book appearing on Amazon. The book has been out for a bit, but it's going up on Amazon, I think, by next week, and so I'll let you know a little bit about that. And as always, if you'd like to talk about anything that's going on, I am a counselor who can maybe give you a listening ear, get in touch with me, info@drjohnrich.com. Thanks for tuning in. Bye, Noelle.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Living in a city, when you're in it, watch the people walk by. And if you listen real close, you can hear them talk about their lives. And some hate it, some love it, some are felt, some are just tired. These are the people in the neighborhood, they just trying to make it out right. See, she never wanted to be a new
IPMNation.com.